Before we begin, a quick and important disclaimer. This video is intended for educational and entertainment purposes only and does not constitute legal, financial, or professional real estate advice. The complexities of family law and property distribution vary significantly by jurisdiction and individual circumstance. We are not attorneys, certified financial planners, or licensed therapists. You should not act or refrain from acting on the basis of any content included in this video without seeking the appropriate legal or other professional advice on the particular facts and circumstances at issue from an attorney licensed in your state. Real estate transactions involving divorce carry significant risks, and viewers are strongly encouraged to conduct their own due diligence and consult with qualified professionals before making any decisions regarding marital assets. The American dream has long been anchored by a white picket fence, but for approximately 40% of first marriages, and an even higher percentage of subsequent ones, that fence eventually becomes a boundary line in a legal battlefield. Every year in the United States, hundreds of thousands of homes are sold, not because the owners want a bigger backyard or a shorter commute, but because a judge or a settlement agreement has mandated the liquidation of the largest asset a couple owns. For decades, these high-stakes transactions were handled by standard residential realtors who were often ill-equipped for the psychological warfare, legal constraints, and financial complexities of a dissolving marriage. This gap in the market birthed a specialized, often invisible sector of the industry, the divorce real estate specialist. Statistically, the marital home represents between 60 to 70% of a household's net worth for the average American family. When you realize that real estate is the primary engine of wealth building in this country, the mishandling of a home sale during a divorce isn't just a personal tragedy. It is a massive transfer of wealth away from families and into the hands of creditors, tax authorities, and legal fees. Today, we are beginning a deep dive retrospective into how this niche emerged, why it has become one of the most critical roles in the modern U.S. economy, and the systemic failures of the traditional real estate model that led to its necessity. This is not just a look at houses. It is a look at the evolution of the American family through the lens of its most valuable possession. To understand the current state of divorce real estate, we have to look back at the historical trends that shaped our property laws. For much of the early 20th century, the concept of a divorce real estate agent didn't exist because the legal framework for asset division was drastically different. In many states, the title held the power. If a husband's name was on the deed, the property was often his, regardless of the marriage's duration. It wasn't until the 1970s and 80s, with the widespread adoption of no-fault divorce and the evolution of equitable distribution laws, that the marital home became a shared asset that required a neutral third-party valuation and sale. This shift transformed the home from a shelter into a liquidable asset that needed to be split with mathematical precision. However, the real estate industry was slow to catch up. For years, the standard practice was for one spouse to hire their agent, leading to immediate distrust from the other party. We have seen historical case studies where a lack of neutrality resulted in pocket listings or biased marketing strategies that undervalued the home, simply to speed up a sale and satisfy one party's desire to exit the situation. This led to a catastrophic loss of equity. In a deep dive into historical trends, we find that homes sold under the duress of divorce without specialized guidance often sold for significantly less than their fair market value, sometimes as much as 10 to 15% lower, because the agents involved were not trained to manage the stigma of a forced sale or the interference of a non-cooperative spouse. The problem this solves for you today is one of financial survival. Whether you are a homeowner facing this reality, a real estate professional looking to specialize, or an investor tracking market inventory, understanding the mechanics of divorce real estate is essential. We are currently living through a period of higher for longer interest rates and a silver tsunami of aging homeowners. These two factors are creating a perfect storm. Many couples are currently locked in to 3% mortgage rates, making the decision to divorce and sell a home a move that could potentially double their housing costs in a new environment. The divorce real estate specialist today must be part economist, part mediator, and part legal strategist. Consider the complexity of a modern U.S. property sale in a divorce context. You are no longer just dealing with a buyer and a seller. You are dealing with two sellers who may not be on speaking terms, two separate sets of legal counsel, a guardian ad litem representing the interests of children, and potentially a court-appointed receiver. A standard agent sees a listing. A specialist sees a chain of liability. If an agent fails to understand the difference between a quitclaim deed and an interspousal transfer deed, They can inadvertently trigger tax consequences or title issues that haunt the parties for years. The potential outcomes of a poorly managed sale include capital gains tax traps that could have been avoided with a properly timed sale under Section 121 of the Internal Revenue Code. We must also examine the psychological infrastructure of these transactions. In high-conflict cases, the house is often the last vestige of control. We have documented historical instances where one spouse purposefully sabotaged showings by leaving the home in disarray or refusing to sign closing documents at the 11th hour. The evolution of the specialized agent involved the development of neutrality protocols. These are step-by-step systems designed to ensure that both parties receive identical communication, that the marketing of the home remains untainted by the personal drama, and that the agent remains a witness for the court rather than an advocate for a person. In this masterclass, we are going to peel back the layers of how the U.S. real estate market has adapted to the gray divorce trend, the doubling of the divorce rate for those over the age of 50 since the 1990s. For this demographic, the home is not just an asset, it is their retirement fund. A mistake in the sale of the family residence at age 65 is far more devastating than a mistake at age 35, as there is less time to recover the lost equity. We will analyze the data on how specialized designations, like the Certified Divorce Real Estate Professional, CDRE, or the Real Estate Collaboration Specialist Divorce, RCSD, have started to change the landscape of the American courtroom. By the end of this 10-part retrospective, you will understand the intricate dance between the tiers of value, the difference between a fair market value, used by agents, and the evidentiary value, used by courts. We will explore how the rise of digital footprints and smart home technology has added a new layer of complexity to divorce sales, from Nest thermostats being used for surveillance to the division of cryptocurrency mined on home servers. The role of the divorce real estate agent is no longer just about putting a sign in the yard. It is about navigating the most volatile intersection of law and finance in the United States. We are moving beyond the surface-level advice and into the engine room of marital asset liquidation. Stay with us as we break down the mechanics of the most difficult sale in real estate. The difference between a standard real estate transaction and a divorce listing is like the difference between flying a commercial airliner and landing a fighter jet on an aircraft carrier in a hurricane. Both involve aviation, but the margins for error, the specialized training required, and the catastrophic potential outcomes of a mistake are entirely different. To understand exactly why this specialized sector became an absolute necessity by the year 2026, we have to look at the anatomy of the sale itself. In a traditional home sale, the agent and the sellers are a unified team working toward a common goal, which is usually maximizing profit in the shortest amount of time. In a divorce, you rarely have a unified team. You have two warring factions who happen to co-own a highly illiquid, emotionally charged asset. Consider a case study of a typical American couple, Michael and Jessica, navigating this process in 2026. They purchased their 4-bedroom home in a suburb of Atlanta back in 2019. Like millions of Americans, they secured a highly favorable mortgage rate of around 3%. Over the last 7 years, their home appreciated significantly, creating a substantial pool of equity. However, as their marriage dissolved, that equity became a massive point of contention. If Michael and Jessica were to hire a traditional real estate agent, perhaps a friend from their country club or a neighborhood expert whose face is on local grocery store carts, they would immediately walk into a trap of perceived bias. If Jessica selects the agent, Michael will naturally assume that the agent is working in her best financial interest, perhaps underpricing the home so Jessica can afford to buy him out, or overpricing it to sabotage a quick sale out of spite. This is where the traditional real estate model entirely fractures. The traditional agent is trained to take direction from their client. But who is the client when both names are on the deed, and they are giving conflicting instructions? Imagine if Michael tells the agent to accept an offer of $600,000 because he wants to liquidate and move to Florida, while Jessica refuses any offer under $650,000 because she needs maximum capital to afford a new home in the current high-interest rate environment of 2026. A standard agent is paralyzed in this scenario. They end up playing marriage counselor, a role for which they are completely unqualified, and they often end up violating their fiduciary duties to one or both parties. Historical trends show us that homes sold in high-conflict divorces by untrained agents often linger on the market for months longer than average and sell for substantially less than their fair market value. This equity bleed is a direct result of sabotage, whether intentional or subconscious. The specialized divorce real estate agent steps into this chaos not as a friend or a confidant, but as a neutral officer of the court. Their first step is implementing strict neutrality protocols. This means absolutely no private phone calls or text messages with either Michael or Jessica. All communication is routed through a centralized, documented portal where both spouses and their respective legal counsels can see every update, every showing feedback, and every strategy recommendation simultaneously. Let us look deeper into the financial mechanics that these specialists manage, specifically regarding tax liabilities. One of the most severe potential outcomes of a mishandled divorce sale involves the capital gains tax exclusion. Under Section 121 of the Internal Revenue Code, a married couple filing jointly can generally exclude up to $500,000 of capital gains on the sale of their primary residence, provided they meet specific ownership and use tests. However, in many divorces, one spouse moves out of the marital home while the other stays with the children until they graduate high school, a process known as a deferred sale or a delayed buyout. If this arrangement is not explicitly and correctly structured in the final divorce decree, the outspouse who moved away could lose their primary residence status over time. Years later, when the house is finally sold, that outspouse could be hit with a massive, unexpected capital gains tax bill, effectively wiping out their share of the equity. A specialized agent identifies this timeline risk immediately and works in tandem with family law attorneys and forensic accountants to ensure the settlement language protects both parties. Now, imagine if the property has hidden debt. A traditional agent typically runs a preliminary title report right before closing. A divorce specialist pulls a comprehensive title search on day one. In our case study, Michael might have secretly taken out a home equity line of credit in the months leading up to the divorce filing to fund legal fees or a separate lifestyle. Or perhaps Jessica stopped paying the property taxes out of spite, resulting in a municipal lien. Uncovering these encumbrances early is critical because the proceeds of the sale must be meticulously calculated and distributed, according to the court order, not standard escrow instructions. If a surprise lien appears days before closing, the entire transaction can collapse, triggering further litigation and destroying the financial lifelines both parties desperately need. The physical preparation and showing of the home present an entirely different theater of conflict. In many instances, the spouse residing in the home does not want to sell. Their goal is to frustrate the process. We have seen documented historical trends where an uncooperative in-spouse will intentionally leave dirty laundry strewn across the primary bedroom, refuse to crate aggressive pets during open houses, or simply refuse to unlock the door for scheduled buyer viewings. A standard agent will call the outspouse and complain, fueling the domestic fire. A specialized divorce agent treats this as an evidentiary issue. They document the condition of the home with time-stamped photographs, they log the denied entry attempts, and they compile an objective, emotionless report that is submitted directly to the judge. The judge can then use this empirical data to issue financial sanctions against the uncooperative spouse, adjusting the final equity payout to compensate the other party for the sabotage. The specialist operates with the precision of an auditor, turning emotional sabotage into actionable legal data. This level of rigorous documented intervention is why the legal community in 2026 has increasingly refused to work with standard realtors on high net worth or high conflict cases. The risk of malpractice, the threat of lost equity, and the sheer administrative burden of managing a chaotic sale are simply too high. The specialist absorbs this friction. They understand that they are not just selling a structure made of wood and concrete. They are executing a complex financial uncoupling, mandated by a state authority. They know exactly how to manage deferred maintenance when neither party has the liquid cash to fix a leaking roof before listing. They know how to negotiate repair credits with buyers without triggering a new war between the sellers over who should pay for a plumbing issue. As we continue to dissect this hidden industry, you have to wonder what happens when the warfare moves from the living room directly into the courtroom. What happens when a judge is forced to sign a deed because a spouse completely vanishes or refuses to pick up a pen? And more importantly, how are malicious spouses using the very structure of their modern 2026 mortgage to trap their ex-partners in financial ruin long after the final gavel strikes? The legal mechanisms designed to force a sale can be just as dangerous as the divorce itself, and the traps hidden within the escrow process have bankrupted thousands of Americans who thought the worst was behind them. The moment a judge issues a court order mandating the liquidation of a marital asset, a ticking clock begins. And this is exactly where the standard real estate playbook is completely thrown out the window. Many homeowners assume that a court order is a magic wand that instantly forces cooperation. Historical trends from family courts across the United States prove this assumption is a catastrophic miscalculation. A piece of paper signed by a judge does not physically unlock a door. It does not clean a property for a showing, and most importantly, it does not physically force a reluctant spouse to sign the closing documents at the escrow office. When one party decides to weaponize the transaction, the escrow process transforms from a simple administrative closing into a high-stakes legal hostage situation. To understand the severity of this, we must examine the silent gatekeepers of the American real estate market, the title insurance companies. In the year 2026, title companies operate with hypervigilance, utilizing advanced risk assessment algorithms. Their entire business model is based on guaranteeing that a buyer is receiving a clean, undisputed legal right to a property. If a title company detects even a hint of unresolved marital friction, such as a pending family court date or an ambiguous property settlement agreement, they will simply refuse to issue a title insurance policy. Without title insurance, no mortgage lender in the country will fund the buyer's loan. The sale completely collapses, regardless of how much the buyer wants the house or how perfectly the real estate agent staged the living room. Imagine if you are the spouse who desperately needs the proceeds from this sale to secure new housing. You have successfully navigated the emotional trauma of the separation. You have secured a buyer in a volatile housing market, and you are 3 days away from closing. Then, your ex-partner simply stops communicating. They do not answer calls from the escrow officer. They ignore their own attorney, and they refuse to schedule a time to sign the grant deed transferring the property to the buyer. A standard real estate agent has zero protocol for this scenario. They will panic, they will likely call the uncooperative spouse and beg, which only gives the saboteur more power and satisfaction. The buyer, facing losing their locked-in mortgage rate, will issue a demand to close or they will walk away, taking their earnest money deposit with them. This is where the specialized training of a divorced real estate professional becomes the only lifeline. When faced with a non-compliant spouse at the closing table, the specialist immediately initiates a highly coordinated legal maneuver, known as seeking an eleaser. An eleaser is a person, typically the clerk of the court, appointed by a judge to sign legal documents on behalf of a recalcitrant party. The specialist does not waste time arguing with the ex-spouse. Instead, they provide an immediate, meticulously documented affidavit to the cooperating spouse's family law attorney. This affidavit outlines the exact timeline of the escrow demands, the documented refusal to sign, and the imminent financial harm that will occur if the buyer cancels the contract. Because family courts in 2026 are heavily backlogged, getting an emergency hearing for an eleaser is incredibly difficult. It requires bulletproof evidence of malicious delay, not just a standard real estate agent complaining about a slow client. The specialist works as an evidentiary gatherer, providing the court with the precise escrow instructions, the buyer's verified loan approval, and the exact financial penalty the marital estate will suffer if the court does not intervene immediately. When successful, the judge grants the motion, the clerk of the court signs the deed in place of the refusing spouse, and the title company accepts this judicial signature to close the file. The saboteur is bypassed entirely, but only because the agent knew the legal mechanism existed and had the foresight to prep the evidence long before the closing date. But getting the deed signed is only half the battle. The disbursement of the hundreds of thousands of dollars in equity is the ultimate trapdoor in these transactions. Standard escrow instructions are designed to split proceeds 50-50 between joint owners, or to cut a single check to a married couple. In a divorce, a 50-50 split is almost never the reality. There are unequal divisions of debt, reimbursements for separate property contributions, attorney fee allocations, and potentially court-ordered sanctions against one spouse for bad behavior during the marriage. Consider a case study involving a typical suburban home sale. The court order dictates that the husband receives 60% of the proceeds and the wife receives 40%, but the wife is also ordered to pay off a specific credit card debt from her share before disbursement. If the real estate agent fails to provide the escrow officer with the exact, finalized marital settlement agreement, and instead relies on standard boilerplate closing instructions, the escrow officer might accidentally disburse the funds equally. Or worse, they might release the funds without paying the mandated debt. Once that wire transfer hits a personal bank account, recovering the misallocated funds requires initiating entirely new, wildly expensive litigation. A specialized divorce real estate agent intercepts this risk by demanding that custom, mutual escrow instructions are drafted and signed by both family law attorneys weeks before closing. They ensure that the escrow officer is acting strictly as an agent of the court order, not merely as a facilitator of the real estate contract. They anticipate the final accounting battles, such as who pays for the mandatory termite repair, or how the property tax proration is divided when one spouse vacated the home 8 months prior. Every single dollar on the closing statement is a potential landmine, and the specialist maps the minefield before the buyer ever submits an offer. Even with the legal and financial safeguards in place, the physical reality of the property remains a volatile battleground. We have discussed the paper traps, the legal maneuvering, and the escrow dangers. But what happens when the warfare moves from the attorney's office directly into the physical structure of the home itself? What occurs when a bitter spouse decides that if they cannot keep the house, nobody will, and they begin utilizing 2026 smart home technology to not only destroy the property value, but to actively surveil and sabotage the buyers and the real estate agent during the showing process? The financial traps are devastating, but the psychological and physical sabotage is where the process becomes truly dangerous. The modern American home in the year 2026 is an interconnected web of digital surveillance and automated control. From smart thermostats and Wi-Fi-enabled refrigerators to biometric door locks and ubiquitous interior security cameras, the average property is essentially a living computer. In a healthy marriage, this technology offers convenience and peace of mind. In a hostile divorce, this exact same network transforms into a weapon of psychological warfare and real estate sabotage. When we examine historical trends in high-conflict property liquidations, the weaponization of the smart home represents one of the most significant shifts in how divorce real estate is handled today. Imagine if you are a prospective buyer walking into a beautiful, four-bedroom home in suburban Dallas. You are excited, your real estate agent is pointing out the upgraded kitchen features, and you are discussing your potential offer. Suddenly, a voice booms from the living room security camera, warning you that the foundation is cracked, the roof leaks every winter, and the neighborhood is completely unsafe. The voice belongs to the disgruntled out spouse, who kept the master administrator passwords for the home network, and is actively monitoring the showing from an apartment 50 miles away. Or perhaps the sabotage is more subtle. The showing agent arrives with the buyers, only to find that the smart locks have been remotely scrambled, denying them entry. When they finally do get inside, the smart thermostat has been intentionally set to 89 degrees in the middle of a Texas summer, making the environment physically intolerable. The buyers leave within 5 minutes, entirely alienated by the oppressive atmosphere, and another potential sale is destroyed. A traditional real estate agent is completely out of their depth in this scenario. Their standard protocol is to call the tech support line for the smart lock company, or to simply complain to the sellers. But complaining to a spouse who is actively trying to ruin the sale only validates their strategy. The potential outcomes of ignored digital sabotage are severe. Not only does the property sit on the market, bleeding equity month after month, but unauthorized audio recording of buyers during a private showing can trigger massive legal liabilities. In many two-party consent states, recording a private conversation without permission is a criminal offense. If an angry spouse is using the nanny cam to listen to buyers discuss their negotiation strategy, they are creating a chain of liability that can drag the real estate agent, the brokerage, and the marital estate into a devastating privacy lawsuit. This is precisely why the specialized divorce real estate professional in 2026 begins their listing process with a mandatory Day 1 digital audit. Before a sign ever goes into the yard, the specialist treats the home as a compromised environment. They employ a step-by-step protocol to sever all remote access to the property's infrastructure. They require the in-spouse to physically reset all network hubs to factory settings, effectively locking out the remote spouse. They conduct a room-by-room sweep to identify and physically disable or cover any interior cameras. Most importantly, they integrate digital possession clauses into the listing agreement and the court orders. This legally mandates who holds the digital keys to the property during the listing period and outlines strict financial penalties for any unauthorized access or electronic interference with the showing process. But the sabotage does not stop at the digital perimeter. The physical environment itself is frequently weaponized by the spouse residing in the home, who refuses to accept the reality of the impending sale. Historical trends demonstrate a pattern of behavior known as passive-aggressive deferment. This is where the in-spouse purposefully creates an environment that repels buyers without crossing the line into blatant, illegal property destruction. Imagine if the residing spouse begins a complex, do-it-yourself plumbing project in the primary bathroom just days before the first open house. They leave the drywall torn open, pipes exposed, and tools scattered everywhere, claiming to the court that they were simply trying to increase the home's value before the sale. To a buyer, the home looks like a money pit. Other forms of physical sabotage involve weaponizing odors and cleanliness. The in-spouse might intentionally cook incredibly pungent foods an hour before a scheduled showing, or refuse to clean up after multiple large pets, creating a visceral, negative reaction the moment a buyer crosses the threshold. They might park broken-down vehicles in the driveway or strategically hoard boxes in the most valuable spaces of the home, such as the primary walk-in closet or the garage, making it impossible for buyers to assess the square footage. The strategy is to exhaust the outspouse, the agent, and the market until the outspouse simply gives up and accepts a lowball buyout offer just to escape the nightmare. The specialized divorce agent counters this physical warfare through rigorous documentation and the strategic deployment of family law mechanisms. They do not argue with the hoarding spouse. Instead, they hire third-party professional stagers and home inspectors to create an objective baseline report of the property's condition. If the in-spouse degrades the property below this baseline, the specialist documents the degradation with time-stamped visual evidence. This data is then immediately transmitted to the legal teams. When the sabotage reaches a critical mass, the specialist assists the attorneys in filing a motion for an exclusive possession order or a kick-out order. Because the agent has provided empirical, undeniable proof that the residing spouse is actively destroying the marital equity and violating their fiduciary duty to the estate, the judge has the factual basis required to order that spouse to physically vacate the property entirely for the duration of the sale. The locks are changed, professional cleaners are brought in, and the home is finally stabilized. The specialist acts as a shield, absorbing the chaos and translating domestic warfare into actionable legal strategy, ensuring the asset is preserved and liquidated at its true market value. Through meticulous digital audits and court-ordered evictions of sabotaging spouses, the specialist eventually neutralizes the threats. The house is stabilized, the marketing is pristine, and finally a qualified buyer is secured and escrow is opened. The finish line seems to be in sight. But just as the physical and psychological battles are won, a completely silent, invisible threat often emerges from the deepest corners of the couple's financial history. What happens when the routine title search uncovers a massive unrecorded IRS tax lien tied to a secret offshore account? Or when a hidden cryptocurrency loan taken out by one spouse years ago suddenly attaches itself to the deed of the house, effectively paralyzing the entire transaction and threatening to send both parties into federal bankruptcy court before the sale can even close. The financial infrastructure of a home sale in 2026 is often haunted by what professionals call ghost liabilities. These are encumbrances, debts, or legal claims that do not appear on a standard credit report, but are tied directly to the title of the real property. In a traditional real estate transaction, these surprises are rare. In a divorce, they are almost a statistical certainty. To understand the gravity of this, we must look at the case study of Robert and Elena, a high-earning couple in Seattle. Elena is a corporate executive, and Robert is a tech entrepreneur. During their 15-year marriage, they built a massive amount of equity in a contemporary home overlooking Lake Washington. In early 2026, as their divorce reached a boiling point, they agreed to sell the property. Their standard neighborhood agent listed the home, found a buyer within 2 weeks, and opened escrow. Everything appeared to be moving toward a smooth liquidation until the preliminary title report arrived from the title company. What that report revealed was a massive abstract of judgment for $300,000, filed by a former business partner of Robert's 3 years prior. Elena had no idea this debt existed. Because Washington is a community property state, this judgment, though stemming from Robert's private business failure, had attached itself to the marital residence like a parasite. This is the moment where a standard real estate transaction usually dies. The buyer's lender, seeing a $300,000 lien on a property with a $1.5 million price tag, immediately froze the loan application. The buyer, fearing they were walking into a legal quagmire, prepared to cancel the contract and demand the return of their earnest money. In this scenario, a specialized divorce real estate agent operates differently than a traditional realtor. While a traditional agent might simply tell the sellers to pay the debt or call their lawyers, the specialist understands the intersection of title law and family law. They know that in many jurisdictions, a judgment against one spouse might not necessarily attach to the entire property if the debt was incurred post-separation or under specific fraudulent circumstances. The specialist immediately coordinates with the title curative officer, a specialized role within the title company that focuses exclusively on clearing complex clouds on title. Step by step, they analyze the judgment to see if it was properly recorded, and if it qualifies for a partial release of the property. Historical trends in the mid-2020s have shown a massive spike in these types of hidden liabilities due to the rise of decentralized finance and private equity loans. Imagine a scenario where one spouse, feeling the financial pressure of a pending divorce, takes out a private loan using a digital asset platform, pledging their interest in the house as collateral through a poorly understood smart contract. While these may not always be legally binding in a traditional courtroom, they create a cloud on the title that prevents a clean transfer to a new buyer. The divorce specialist in 2026 must be proficient in reading not just standard title reports, but also identifying potential UCC-1 financing statements, which are often used to claim interest in fixtures like solar panels, high-end HVAC systems, or even integrated smart home servers. If a spouse signed a financing agreement for a $50,000 solar array without the other spouse's knowledge, that debt must be satisfied at the closing table, often leading to a massive reduction in the expected net proceeds for the innocent spouse. Let us look deeper at the IRS and the notice of federal tax lien. This is perhaps the most dangerous ghost liability in a divorce sale. Because the IRS has a superior claim to almost all other creditors, a federal tax lien can paralyze a sale indefinitely. In our case study of Robert and Elena, let us imagine that Robert had underreported his business income for 2 years, leading to a tax deficiency of over $100,000. When the IRS files a lien, it attaches to all property owned by the taxpayer, including the family home. Elena might attempt to claim innocent spouse relief under Section 6015 of the Internal Revenue Code, arguing that she had no knowledge of the underreporting and did not benefit from the unpaid taxes. However, the IRS moves at a glacial pace compared to a 30-day real estate escrow. The specialized agent manages this potential outcome by anticipating the tax issue months before the home is even listed. They demand that both parties provide a tax clearance certificate or a transcript of their account from the IRS as part of the initial listing disclosure package. If a lien is discovered, the specialist works with a tax attorney to file an application for a certificate of discharge of property from the federal tax lien. This is a specific process where the IRS agrees to release its claim on the physical house so it can be sold to a third party, provided that the proceeds are held in a court-supervised blocked account or paid directly to the IRS at closing. A traditional agent who waits until the middle of escrow to discover a tax lien is essentially ensuring that the sale will fail, the buyer will walk, and the property will eventually face a forced foreclosure sale by the government. The depth of this investigation extends to mechanics liens as well. Imagine if, during the separation, the spouse living in the house hired a contractor to remodel the kitchen to make it more attractive for the sale, but then refused to pay the contractor because they were unhappy with the quality of the marble. That contractor can file a mechanics lien against the property. Even if the amount is small, perhaps only $5,000, it creates an uninsurable title. In the high-stakes environment of 2026, where every dollar is scrutinized, these small liens are often used as tactical weapons. One spouse might encourage a friendly contractor to file a fraudulent lien just to stall the sale and stay in the house longer. The divorce real estate specialist knows how to use a mechanics lien release bond to move the claim from the house to a cash bond, allowing the sale to proceed while the parties fight over the $5,000 in a separate small claims action. This brings us to the most complex financial intersection of all, the underwater divorce in a high-interest rate environment. By 2026, many homeowners who purchased at the peak of the market in 2022 or 2024 are finding that their homes have not appreciated as fast as their debt has accumulated. When you factor in the cost of the sale, including commissions, closing costs, and those hidden liens we just discussed, many couples are discovering that they actually owe more on the house than it is worth. This is known as a short sale, and in the context of a divorce, it is a financial minefield. In a traditional short sale, the bank is the primary negotiator. In a divorce short sale, the bank, the two spouses, and the two sets of lawyers are all at the table. The potential outcomes for an underwater couple are grim if not managed correctly. If they simply stop paying the mortgage out of spite or inability to agree on who is responsible for the monthly bill, they trigger a foreclosure. A foreclosure sale on the courthouse steps usually results in the loss of all equity, and a catastrophic blow to both parties' credit scores at exactly the time they need those scores to rent or buy new housing. The specialist prevents this by negotiating a short sale approval that includes a deficiency waiver, ensuring that the bank cannot pursue either spouse for the remaining debt after the house is sold. As we have seen, the financial ghosts of a marriage can be far more persistent than the emotional ones. We have covered the hidden liens, the tax traps, and the digital debts that can kill a deal in seconds. But even if the title is clean and the debt is managed, there is one final, invisible barrier that can stop a 2026 real estate transaction in its tracks. It is not a lien and it is not a court order. It is the sudden, unexpected refusal of the primary mortgage lender to allow the sale to happen at all, even when there is a willing buyer and a fair price. Why would a bank stop a couple from paying off their loan? The answer lies in a hidden clause in nearly every modern mortgage agreement that is being triggered at record rates in 2026, and it is turning amicable separations into absolute financial ruin. The clause that is currently sending shockwaves through the 2026 real estate market is known as the due on sale or acceleration clause. Found in nearly every standard Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac uniform mortgage instrument, this provision gives the lender the right to demand full payment of the remaining loan balance if any interest in the property is transferred without the lender's prior written consent. For decades, many divorce attorneys and traditional realtors operated under the assumption that the Garnes-T-Germain Depository Institutions Act of 1982 provided a blanket of federal protection for divorcing couples. This federal law generally prohibits a lender from exercising its due-on-sale option for a transfer where the spouse becomes an owner of the property as a result of a decree of a dissolution of marriage or a legal separation agreement. However, in the high-interest rate environment of 2026, lenders have become increasingly aggressive in finding technical loopholes to force a refinance of low-interest rate loans. Imagine the situation of Marcus and Sarah in Denver. They are currently navigating a relatively amicable split and have decided that Marcus will stay in the home they purchased in 2021 with a mortgage rate of 2.75%. Their plan is simple. Sarah will sign a quitclaim deed transferring her ownership interest to Marcus, and in exchange, Marcus will pay her a portion of the equity they have built. They assume that because they are divorcing, the lender will simply remove Sarah's name from the loan and let Marcus keep that 2.75% rate. This is the exact moment they enter a financial death trap. While the Garnes-T-Germain Act protects the transfer of the deed, it does not mandate that the lender release Sarah from the financial liability of the mortgage. When Marcus and Sarah approach the bank to remove her name, the bank informs them that the only way to release Sarah is for Marcus to go through a formal mortgage assumption process or a full refinance. In 2026, with current mortgage rates hovering around 8%, a refinance would more than double Marcus's monthly payment, making the home instantly unaffordable. If Marcus cannot qualify for the loan on his own merit at 2026 debt-to-income standards, the bank denies the assumption. Sarah is now trapped. She has given up her legal ownership of the house by signing the quitclaim deed, but she is still 100% liable for the hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. If Marcus misses a single payment 3 years from now, it is Sarah's credit score that takes the hit. If Marcus files for bankruptcy, the bank will come after Sarah for the full balance. Historical trends from the mid-2020s show a massive spike in post-divorce litigation where one spouse is suing the other because they cannot qualify for a new car loan or a new apartment because the old marital mortgage is still showing up as a massive liability on their credit report. This is where the specialized divorce real estate agent intervenes before the deed is ever signed. The specialist understands that there is a massive difference between a transfer of title and a release of liability. They work step by step with the couple to initiate a qualified assumption. This is a grueling administrative process where Marcus must prove to the lender that he has the independent financial capacity to maintain the loan. The specialist acts as a liaison with the lender's loss mitigation department, providing the necessary court-ordered separation agreements and financial affidavits in a format the bank's underwriters will actually accept. If a qualified assumption is not possible, the specialist must guide the couple through a much more difficult conversation, the necessity of a sale. This is often the point where an amicable divorce turns into a war. Sarah wants to sell to get her name off the debt. Marcus wants to stay because he knows he can never afford another home at 2026 rates. The specialist must provide the court with a detailed analysis of the potential outcomes of both scenarios. They use a tool known as a house opportunity report, which calculates the true net cost of a refinance versus a sale, including the loss of the low interest rate asset. When the court sees the data, the judge often has no choice but to order the sale of the home to protect both parties' financial futures. But selling the home creates its own set of 2026 specific problems, particularly regarding the recapture of depreciation and capital gains. Consider an imagine-if scenario where the couple has used a portion of the home for a home-based business or as a short-term rental. A standard agent might miss the fact that the depreciation claimed on those portions of the home must be recaptured at a tax rate of up to 25% upon the sale. If this tax liability is not accounted for in the divorce settlement, one spouse might end up with a much smaller actual net gain than the other, leading to a new round of legal battles. The specialized agent also looks at the historical trends of equity stripping. In 2026, we are seeing a rise in predatory lending, where companies offer quick cash buyouts to divorcing couples. These companies promise to take the house off their hands and handle the mortgage, but they often use suboptimal legal structures like wraparound mortgages or subject to deals that can leave both spouses in a state of perpetual risk. The specialist educates the couple on why these potential outcomes are often worse than a traditional market sale, even a difficult one. Furthermore, the specialist must manage the intricate timing of the sale to align with the U.S. academic calendar if children are involved, while also navigating the 2026 market inventory fluctuations. They don't just put a sign in the yard. They coordinate with the family law attorneys to ensure that the listing price is agreed upon in a signed stipulation. This prevents one spouse from claiming later that the agent and the other spouse colluded to sell the house under market value to a friend or associate. Step by step, the specialist builds a fortress of documentation. They keep a log of every single showing, every piece of buyer feedback, and every offer received. In 2026, this level of transparency is the only way to prevent a disgruntled spouse from filing a grievance with the real estate board or a lawsuit against the marital estate. They are not just selling a house. They are managing a court-supervised liquidation where every mistake has a six-figure price tag. As we have seen, the mortgage itself is a living entity that can survive the death of a marriage and haunt both parties for years. We have navigated the traps of the due-on-sale clause, the nightmare of the quitclaim deed, and the aggressive tactics of 2026 lenders. But there is another player in this game that most people completely forget about until it is far too late. It is a player that has its own set of rules, its own timeline, and the power to seize the property regardless of what the divorce judge says. We are talking about the hidden world of HOA foreclosures and municipal code enforcement, and how a single unpaid lawn mowing fine during a divorce can lead to the total loss of $1 million asset before the lawyers even finish their opening statements. But even more dangerous than a city fine is the emerging trend of AI-driven title theft, which specifically targets properties in the middle of a messy divorce. How are hackers in 2026 using public divorce filings to steal the entire equity of a home in less than 48 hours? And why is the standard real estate agent completely powerless to stop them? The answer is as terrifying as it is brilliant, and it is changing the way we look at property ownership forever. The vulnerability begins with the public nature of the United States legal system. In 2026, sophisticated automated bots constantly scrape county clerk websites the millisecond a new divorce petition is filed. These algorithms are not merely looking for names, they are calculating what is known as a liquidity score. By cross-referencing the divorce filing with property tax records, historical purchase prices, and automated valuation models, these bots identify properties with high equity and low remaining mortgage balances. When a couple enters the legal system to dissolve their marriage, they are essentially signaling to the world that their household is in a state of transition and, more importantly, that their communication is likely fractured. This fracture is the primary exploit used in modern title theft. To understand the mechanics, we must look at the evolution of remote online notarization, or RON. While RON was hailed as a breakthrough for convenience, by 2026, it has become a double-edged sword. Criminal organizations now utilize generative AI to create high-fidelity deepfakes of homeowners. Using the stolen personal data often found in previous large-scale breaches, these actors can bypass biometric identity verification systems used by some digital notary platforms. In a matter of hours, a fraudulent quitclaim deed is generated, electronically notarized, and submitted to the county recorder. This deed purports to transfer the property from the couple to a third-party shell company, or a synthetic identity. Once the deed is recorded, the clock starts ticking on a process known as equity stripping. The fraudster, now appearing as the legal owner on title, applies for a high-interest bridge loan or a hard money loan against the property. Because these lenders often prioritize the value of the collateral over the creditworthiness of the borrower, the loan is funded rapidly. The cash is wired to an offshore account or converted into untraceable digital assets. By the time the actual homeowners realize what has happened, their equity has been drained, and a new very real lien has been placed on their home by a lender who believes they have a legitimate claim. Consider the case study of David and Samantha in Phoenix, Arizona. In early 2026, they filed for divorce after 20 years of marriage. Their home was valued at $1.2 million with only $100,000 left on the mortgage. Amidst the chaos of moving into separate apartments and arguing over child custody, David didn't notice the small notification from the county assessor's office regarding a title change. He assumed it was a standard part of the legal paperwork his attorney was handling. Samantha assumed the same. It wasn't until a process server arrived at the door with a foreclosure notice from a private lending group that they realized someone else had borrowed $800,000 against their house. A standard real estate agent is completely powerless here because they typically do not check the title daily. They check it once when the listing begins and once before closing. A specialized divorce real estate professional, however, integrates title monitoring into their standard workflow. In 2026, this involves placing a title lock or an alert on the property the moment the listing agreement is signed. The specialist also coordinates with the family law attorneys to file a lease pendens, which is a formal notice of a pending lawsuit involving the property. This acts as a massive red flag to any legitimate lender or title company, effectively freezing the property's ability to be used as collateral for a fraudulent loan. While cybercrime is a high-tech threat, the low-tech threat of the Homeowners Association or HOA can be just as devastating to a marital estate. In many U.S. states, HOAs have what is known as superlien status. This means that if HOA dues or fines go unpaid, the association can initiate a foreclosure that potentially wipes out even the primary mortgage. In the heat of a divorce, it is common for both spouses to stop paying the HOA fees, each assuming the other is responsible or simply out of spite. Imagine a scenario where a couple is fighting over a $3 million estate in Florida. The HOA issues a series of fines for unmaintained landscaping because the gardener was let go during the separation. Neither spouse pays the $500 fine. Over 6 months, with interest, late fees, and attorney costs, that $500 balloons into $10,000. The HOA, utilizing its superlien authority, moves to foreclose. Because the spouses are so blinded by their personal conflict, they ignore the notices, assuming their divorce lawyers will handle it. Historical trends show that HOAs often move much faster than family courts. The house can be sold on the courthouse steps for a fraction of its value, leaving the couple with nothing. The specialist prevents this by treating the HOA as a primary creditor. They demand a full accounting of all dues and outstanding violations on day one. Step by step, they ensure that a dedicated portion of the monthly maintenance budget is escrowed, or that the court issues a specific order for one spouse to pay the HOA fees under threat of contempt. They also act as the primary point of contact for the HOA board, ensuring that all legal notices are sent directly to the agent and both sets of counsel, rather than getting lost in a pile of mail at the vacant house. Beyond the HOA, we must look at the municipal level, code enforcement and utility liens. In 2026, many cities have implemented automated camera systems on trash trucks and police cruisers to identify properties with code violations, such as overgrown lawns or peeling paint. These citations are issued digitally. If a house sits vacant while the couple fights in court, these municipal liens can accumulate daily. In some jurisdictions, an unpaid water bill or a recurring weed abatement fine can lead to a tax deed sale. The specialized agent conducts a weekly physical and digital inspection of the property to ensure no municipal ghost liens are attaching themselves to the equity. As we move deeper into this retrospective, we see that the divorce real estate agent of 2026 is part cybersecurity expert and part municipal diplomat. They are the only ones looking at the property through the lens of risk management rather than just sales marketing. They understand that in a divorce, the greatest threats to the asset are often not the buyers or the market, but the silent, automated systems of the modern world that don't care about your marital status. We have now explored the digital and municipal battlegrounds where equity is lost in the shadows. We have seen how deepfakes can steal a title, and how an unmowed lawn can trigger a foreclosure. But even if the title is protected and the HOA is paid, there is a much larger, more systemic issue that often remains hidden until the very end of the process. It involves the way property is valued in the United States, and a concept known as the shadow appraisal. How are sophisticated spouses in 2026 using artificial intelligence to artificially depress the value of their own homes during the discovery phase, only to have that value miraculously skyrocket the moment the divorce is finalized. And why are traditional appraisals failing to catch this high-tech manipulation of the market? The answer lies in the way data is fed into the local multiple listing services, and how a single carefully placed digital footprint can cost a spouse millions of dollars in a settlement. The game is no longer just about who gets the house. It is about who controls the data that tells the world what the house is worth. To understand the magnitude of this shift, we must look at how property valuation has moved from a subjective human opinion to an algorithmic consensus. In the traditional real estate era, an appraisal was a static document produced by a human who walked through the house with a clipboard. In 2026, the valuation of a U.S. home is a dynamic living entity governed by automated valuation models or AVMs. These AVMs do not just look at square footage and recent sales. They ingest thousands of data points, including local crime heat maps, school rating fluctuations, and even social media sentiment regarding a specific neighborhood. In a divorce, this transparency is being weaponized through a technique known as data poisoning. Consider a case study involving Ethan and Chloe, a couple residing in a high-end tech corridor in Palo Alto. Chloe, who has a significant background in data science, wants to buy out Ethan's interest in their $5 million modern estate. To lower the buyout price, she does not just let the grass grow long or leave the house unpainted. Instead, she initiates a digital campaign to depress the home's perceived value during the discovery phase of the divorce. Step by step, she utilizes a network of virtual private servers to simulate a massive lack of interest in the property. Every time the house is searched on major real estate platforms, the bots click on the listing and then immediately bounce, signaling to the platform's algorithm that the property is undesirable or overpriced. Furthermore, Chloe uses neighborhood-centric apps to report non-existent issues, such as a fictional spike in local property noise or fabricated sightings of structural pests in the area. AI-driven valuation tools, which scrape these community boards for sentiment analysis, begin to adjust the property's AVM downward. By the time the court-appointed appraiser arrives, the digital footprint of the home suggests a cooling asset in a declining micromarket. Historical trends in 2026 show that these shadow appraisals can artificially depress a home's valuation by as much as 10 to 15%, representing a potential loss of hundreds of thousands of dollars for the spouse being bought out. A standard real estate agent has no defense against this because they are trained to look at the physical house, not the digital atmosphere. A specialized divorce real estate professional, however, performs what is known as a valuation audit. This is a forensic deep dive into the factors influencing the property's digital price. They start by requesting the raw data from the major AVM providers to see if there have been anomalous spikes in negative engagement. They then cross-reference the digital valuation with a hand-selected set of off-market sales, transactions that occurred privately and were never subjected to the digital sentiment of the public web. The specialist provides the court with a house opportunity report, which serves as a counter-narrative to the poisoned AVM. This report doesn't just argue for a higher price. It exposes the manipulation. It shows the judge exactly how the digital data was skewed and provides a corrected valuation based on empirical, non-poison metrics. In the year 2026, the agent is effectively acting as a data cleaner, restoring the integrity of the asset's value before it is used as the basis for a life-altering financial settlement. But the manipulation of value is only one side of the coin. The other side is the emergence of the institutional black box buyer in the divorce space. In the mid-2020s, large-scale investment firms began utilizing AI to identify distressed marital estates. These firms know that a divorcing couple is often desperate for a quick exit and a clean break. They approach one spouse with an all-cash offer that is slightly below market value, but comes with the lure of a 48-hour closing and no inspections. Imagine a scenario where Ethan, frustrated by Chloe's digital sabotage and the mounting legal fees, decides to bypass the traditional market entirely. He receives a targeted ad from an institutional buyer offering to buy his share of the house immediately. The potential outcomes of this are devastating for Chloe. Because these firms often use complex shell companies to obscure their true intent, she may not realize that the firm buying Ethan's interest is actually an entity she has no legal standing to negotiate with. The house is effectively snatched out from under the family court's jurisdiction and moved into a corporate portfolio, leaving the remaining spouse in a state of legal and residential limbo. The divorce specialist prevents this institutional squeeze by implementing a right of first refusal clause in the very first listing agreement. This ensures that neither spouse can sell their interest to an outside corporate entity without giving the other spouse, And the open market, the opportunity to match the offer. They educate both parties on the historical trends that show institutional buyers often flip these properties for a 20% profit within 90 days, essentially stealing the marital equity that should have been split between the couple. Step by step, the specialist builds a defensive perimeter around the home's equity. They manage the physical showings to ensure the house is presented in its best light, but they also manage the digital showings. This includes using specialized software to block bot traffic from the property's online listing, ensuring that only legitimate buyers are influencing the digital valuation. They also coordinate with digital reputation managers to ensure that any false neighborhood reports are flagged and removed from the datasets used by AVMs. We are seeing a massive shift in how the U.S. legal system views real estate agents. In 2026, the agent is no longer a salesperson. They are a fiduciary witness. Their logs of every interaction, their audits of every valuation, and their defense against institutional predators are becoming the bedrock of marital property law. The court relies on the specialist to provide the ground truth in an era of digital deception. Without this specialized intervention, the marital home, the primary vehicle for middle-class wealth in America, is at the mercy of whoever has the best algorithm. As we have seen, the battle for the home is fought on two fronts, the physical and the digital. We have explored how a spouse can use AI to crash their own home's value, and how corporate sharks are circling the waters of marital distress. But even when the data is clean and the corporate buyers are kept at bay, there is one final overwhelming obstacle that can destroy everything. It is the one thing that neither a judge nor a specialist can fully control. It is the phenomenon of the reluctant buyer, a new class of U.S. home seeker in 2026 who is terrified of the stigma associated with the divorce house. How is the social stigma of a broken home in 2026 actually manifesting as a measurable discount in the final sale price? And what radical high-tech staging techniques are agents using to completely erase the history of a marriage from a house before a buyer ever steps foot inside? The answer involves the use of augmented reality and sensory architecture to create a blank slate. But as we are about to see, erasing the past is much harder and much more expensive than anyone ever imagined. This leads us into the final, most controversial phase of the divorce real estate cycle, the total rebranding of a life. The concept of a blank slate in the American housing market of 2026 has moved far beyond the traditional advice of removing family photos and painting the walls a neutral beige. Today, we are dealing with a phenomenon known as the psychological contagion of a property. Research into historical trends over the last decade indicates that prospective buyers in the United States often perceive a home undergoing a divorce-related sale as having a negative energy or a hidden defect, even when the structure is sound. This perception manifests in what economists now call the stigma discount. Data suggests that properties clearly identified as divorce listings can sit on the market for up to 20% longer and may receive offers significantly lower than comparable homes in the same zip code. To combat this, the specialized divorce real estate agent of 2026 has pioneered the total rebranding of a life, a process that is both technologically advanced and surgically precise. To understand how this works, imagine a scenario in a high-rise luxury condo in Chicago. The characters are Mark and Linda, whose high-conflict separation has left their $3 million home feeling like a battlefield. To a standard agent, the home looks ready to sell. To a specialist, the home is screaming its history. There is a visible shadow on the wall where a large portrait once hung. One side of the primary walk-in closet is hauntingly empty, while the other is overflowing with frantic energy. The home's integrated AI system still addresses visitors with a cheerful welcome message recorded by Mark, a man who hasn't lived there in 6 months. This is not just a house. It is a museum of a failed union. The first step in the modern rebranding process is the digital scrub. In 2026, every high-end home has a digital exhaust. This includes the search history on the smart refrigerator, the personalized climate profiles on the HVAC system, and the saved playlists in the whole home audio network. The specialist employs a technician to perform a factory reset of the entire home operating system. This is not merely for security. It is to ensure that when a buyer walks in, the house does not recognize the past. They remove the digital footprints of the former occupants, ensuring the smart mirrors don't display old calendar appointments or health data. This digital neutralization is the foundation upon which the physical rebranding is built. Next comes the deployment of sensory architecture. This is a field that has seen massive growth in the U.S. real estate sector over the last 5 years. It involves the use of scent, sound, and light to intentionally overwrite the emotional resonance of a space. We are not talking about the old cliché of baking cookies before an open house. We are talking about medical-grade scent diffusion systems that utilize specific terpene profiles designed to lower cortisol levels and induce a sense of security and newness. In our case study of the Chicago condo, the specialist identifies that the home has a lingering scent of the specific cleaning products and perfumes used by the couple for 15 years. These scents are replaced with an olfactory profile designed to mimic the crisp, ozone-rich air of a high-altitude forest. The lighting is equally critical. Using the home's smart lighting grid, the specialist programs a light sequence that shifts throughout the day to maximize the production of serotonin in visitors. They move away from the harsh, dramatic lighting Mark preferred for his art collection and toward a softer, more inclusive glow that makes the space feel accessible to a new family unit. The goal is to make the buyer feel like they are the first person to ever truly inhabit the space. Then we move into the realm of augmented reality staging, or ARS. By 2026, most serious buyers in the United States utilize AR glasses or mobile interfaces during their tours. The divorce specialist works with digital stagers to create a multi-layered AR experience. In the guest room that currently serves as a storage unit for Linda's packed boxes, the AR interface shows a vibrant, sun-drenched nursery or a high-tech home gym. The specialist isn't just hiding the mess. They are providing a digital bridge to a different potential outcome. This allows the buyer to emotionally bypass the current reality of the divorce and connect with the future version of the home. The cost of this total rebranding is substantial, often ranging from 2 to 3% of the property's total value. However, the potential outcomes of failing to rebrand are far more expensive. Without this intervention, the home remains a divorce house. In 2026, buyers are hyper-aware of the vulnerability of the seller. If they see a house in disarray, they smell blood in the water. They know that the couple is likely under court-ordered pressure to liquidate, and they will use that leverage to submit lowball offers. The rebrand acts as a financial shield. It projects a position of strength, suggesting that the sale is a strategic move by a well-capitalized entity, rather than a desperate flight from a crumbling marriage. Let us look at the step-by-step physical neutralization process used by these specialists. They don't just stage the home, they audit it for triggers. A trigger is any item that signals a life interrupted. This includes a single toothbrush and a holder for two, a stack of mail addressed to a name no longer on the lease, or even the specific way the furniture is arranged to facilitate a lifestyle that no longer exists. The specialist will often completely flip the floor plan of a room. If the living room was oriented toward a television for Mark's sports viewing, it is reoriented toward the view or a fireplace to suggest a space for conversation and new beginnings. Historical trends show that this level of intervention has a measurable impact on the appraisal process as well. When an appraiser enters a home that feels like a vibrant, new-to-market listing rather than a distressed asset, their subjective assessment of the home's condition and appeal is statistically higher. In a deep-dive analysis of U.S. sales data from 2024 to 2026, homes that underwent a professional life rebranding sold for an average of 6% more than those that were simply listed as is by the divorcing parties. But the rebrand is not without its ethical and legal complexities. The specialist must be careful not to cross the line from aesthetic rebranding into the concealment of material facts. If a wall is painted to hide a crack caused by a structural failure, that is fraud. If a wall is painted to hide the marks where a child's height was tracked during a marriage that ended in tragedy, that is asset optimization. The specialist operates in this gray area, ensuring the house is presented as a structure of wood and stone, divorced from the human drama that recently unfolded within its walls. As we reach the final stages of the property's transformation, the house is no longer the Mark and Linda house. It is a premium piece of Chicago real estate, ready for its next chapter. The marketing materials are scrubbed of any language that hints at a motivated seller. The listing goes live, the buyers arrive, and the rebranding holds. But as the offers start to roll in, the real test begins. Now that the stage is set and the buyers are biting, we are entering the final, most volatile moment of the entire 10-part journey. It is the moment when the money finally moves. We have to ask, what happens when the wire transfer for millions of dollars is sitting in an escrow account, and one spouse decides at the very last second to file an emergency injunction to freeze the funds? And more importantly, how does the specialized agent manage the final, emotional transition when the keys are handed over, and the legal reality of being homeless and single finally crashes down on the sellers? The closing day is not the end of the story. It is the beginning of the most dangerous financial transition in a person's life. The moment the wire transfer is initiated from the buyer's lender to the escrow account, the psychological weight of the marriage often shifts from a shared burden to a singular, terrifying question of what comes next. In the United States real estate market of 2026, the closing table is not merely a place of signatures. It is the final gate of a financial gauntlet. We have seen historical trends where the final 30 minutes of a transaction are the most volatile. Imagine if the funds are sitting in escrow, ready for disbursement, and one spouse suddenly realizes that the net proceeds are $10,000 less than they anticipated due to a last-minute utility lien or a miscalculation in the property tax proration. In a standard sale, this is a minor hurdle. In a divorce, this is a reason to call an emergency halt to the entire disbursement process. The specialized divorce real estate agent knows that the battle for the equity does not end with a sold sign. It ends when the money is safely partitioned, according to the marital settlement agreement. In 2026, a critical potential outcome of a mishandled closing is the escrow freeze. If the escrow officer receives conflicting instructions from the two sellers, they are legally obligated to hold the funds until a court order is issued or both parties sign a mutual release. This can leave hundreds of thousands of dollars in a non-interest-bearing account for months, while the parties return to court to argue over a few $1,000s in repair credits. The specialist prevents this by requiring a pre-signed disbursement instruction as a condition of the listing itself. This document, often drafted in coordination with the family law attorneys, tells the escrow officer exactly how to cut the checks down to the last penny, leaving no room for a last-minute change of heart or a revenge-driven freeze. However, once the funds hit the personal bank accounts of the now separated individuals, a new and invisible predator emerges: the 2026 tax environment. For many Americans, the sale of the marital home is the largest liquidity event of their lives. Without a specialized agent who understands the nuances of Section 121 of the Internal Revenue Code, the tax consequences can be devastating. For instance, if the home sold for a massive gain and the couple is no longer filing a joint return for the year 2026, each individual is only entitled to a $250,000 capital gains exclusion, rather than the $500,000 exclusion for married couples. If the gain on the property was $800,000, a couple who divorced before the sale could be looking at a taxable gain of $300,000, resulting in a six-figure tax bill that neither party was prepared to pay. The specialist coordinates with a CPA or tax attorney months in advance to determine if the timing of the final decree of divorce should follow or precede the sale of the home to maximize the preservation of the marital estate. Beyond the tax traps lies the reality of the 2026 housing reentry crisis. Many sellers walk away from the closing table with $400,000 in cash, but find themselves functionally homeless. Because the U.S. housing market in 2026 is defined by limited inventory and interest rates that remain significantly higher than the 3% rates of the early 2020s, the cost of re-entering the market as a single person is prohibitive. Furthermore, the divorce itself often leaves a trail of damaged credit. Late payments on joint accounts during the separation phase can drop a credit score by 100 points or more. Historical trends show that many divorcees are forced into the high-priced rental market, where they rapidly deplete their equity on monthly rent that is 50% higher than their previous mortgage payment. The specialized agent addresses this through the House Opportunity Report and the Post-Divorce Housing Plan. They don't just sell the old house, they act as a bridge to the new one. This involves identifying lenders who specialize in divorce reentry loans, products that allow a buyer to use their court-ordered alimony or child support as qualifying income, provided it has a documented history of consistent payment. In 2026, these niche loan products are the only reason many single parents can remain in their existing school districts. The specialist also guides the sellers toward bridge loans or 1031 exchange strategies if the property had an investment component, ensuring that the wealth generated during the marriage isn't entirely evaporated by the friction of the move. The physical handover of the property in 2026 has also evolved into a high-stakes evidentiary process. We have seen case studies where a disgruntled spouse, on their way out the door for the last time, decides to engage in what is known as soft sabotage. This isn't smashing windows, it is taking the remote controls for the smart home system, removing the specialized light bulbs, or taking the manuals for the high-end appliances. In a $1 million home, replacing the proprietary components of a luxury smart system can cost $15,000. A standard agent might tell the buyer to file a claim with their home warranty, A divorce specialist conducts a final possession audit. They use the inventory of fixtures established on day one of the listing and compare it to the state of the home an hour before the keys are handed over. If items are missing, the specialist has the authority to hold back a portion of the offending spouse's equity in escrow until the items are returned or the cost of replacement is satisfied. This deep dive into the divorce real estate industry reveals a profession that has moved from the periphery of the market to its very core. By 2026, the divorce real estate specialist is the ultimate risk manager. They are the ones who understand that the home is not just an asset. It is a legal entity, a tax liability, a digital vault, and an emotional anchor. They have pioneered the use of leaser signatures to bypass sabotage, the deployment of sensory architecture to erase the stigma of a broken home, and the use of title lock technology to prevent AI-driven equity theft. They have turned a process that used to be defined by chaos and equity loss into a disciplined, court-sanctioned liquidation. As we look back at the retrospective of this industry, the data is clear. The rise of the specialist has fundamentally changed the financial landscape of the American family. In an era where the divorce rate remains high and the complexity of asset ownership has skyrocketed, the role of the neutral, high-security, legally literate agent is the only thing standing between a family's future and their total financial ruin. They are the silent architects of the fresh start. The story of the divorce real estate agent is ultimately a story about the resilience of the American middle class. It is about the realization that when a marriage ends, the wealth that was built during that union must be protected with the same intensity that it was created. We have seen how the traditional models of real estate failed to meet the needs of the modern U.S. family, and how a new class of professionals stepped into that void. But as we move toward 2027 and beyond, new challenges are appearing on the horizon. The next evolution of this field involves the integration of blockchain-based smart deeds and the emergence of divorce-proof residential trusts that may change the very nature of how couples hold title to their homes. The battle for the family residence is never truly over. It is simply entering a new, even more complex digital dimension. If you think the physical and financial traps we have covered today are intense, wait until you see the data on how the next generation of U.S. homeowners is using private equity contracts to bypass the divorce courts entirely. The future of homeownership is becoming a landscape of private contracts and algorithm-driven settlements that could make the traditional family court system obsolete. The question is no longer just how you sell a house in a divorce, but whether you will even own the house in the first place when the next wave of corporate housing dominance takes hold.